Okay, so here we are, Unit 5. This is really just the beginning. This is another foundational unit for women's health. Like A&P, we're going to be building on this throughout. So I don't want you guys feeling like if we don't cover everything, I don't want you walking away from tonight feeling like we didn't cover everything. Because this is the foundation of our profession, and we'll just continuously be building on this. Any quick questions or clarification or needs for office hours or Dr. Jen's availability or the school email? All right, otherwise we'll just take right off. So because I apologize for not getting the quiz out beforehand, so this format, this lecture, we'll kind of do some teach back. It'll be the outline topics that was in the unit, and we'll start it by somebody sharing, doing a teach back about what you read on those topics, and then we'll fill in from there. Depending on if we need to or not at the end, we'll kind of go through the reading sections and pretty much cover what would have been on the quiz and what still will be. So the quiz will end up just being a condensed review effectively. Okay, any questions? Okay, here we go. Does anybody want to open us up with something from the reading sections? And it can just be like a general overview. Again, we're trying to utilize these teach backs about how would you explain these to somebody if someone asked you these questions or started this conversation or, came to you for advice or support. How would you talk about this to a young person? Like what is the menstrual cycle about? What's the physiological process?
Can I jump in on this menstrual cycle part?
Yep, absolutely. Start us off. Thank you.
So I just want to share that learning all this stuff is, I keep telling my staff, one of them's pregnant, and just going through, it's amazing. Like our women's bodies are just freaking amazing. And
right.
the things that they do and go through, just in the menstrual cycle alone, and the changes that happen, it just solidifies and instills more of, the teachings that we share with our girls for the coming of age ceremony. And, just acknowledging that power that we have. I mean, to create life and the changes that our bodies go through, because I'm 49 and I still get my menstrual cycle, and I can, when I talk to the girls, I try to help them to become body aware of their body and notice the changes that are happening. So like I can feel when my princess ovum releases, like I feel that little burst, when it happens. Some of the girls we talk about, that feeling of, do you feel that when it's changing? Do you feel that in the reading thing? I like that one PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, the PDF where the cycles and hormones of the reproductive system, and how it helps you to understand auntie and granny. It's just, I don't know. I'm just blown away with all this information.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's hard not to see creator in this, like,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, when I'm supporting families that you know, don't have, well, white families, you know, it's hard to have these conversations without our teaching slipping in and, you know, but I get what you mean. I get exactly where you're coming from. Like it's so fascinating. And even for myself, you know, when I started studying in 2010. And even as my knowledge around this has changed, and then as my body has gone through subsequent pregnancies, and then, you know, noticing like, well, maybe I'm having perimenopausal changes, and then I got pregnant again, and then, like, you know, like you're saying, you notice those subtleties a lot. Anybody else wanna
Like
add to this?
starting to feel more, for me, I'm starting to feel more, shut up, Jason. My husband's sitting beside me. I'm starting to feel more like I feel something on the right side of my uterus. So I'm like, oh, is this it? Is the change happening? Is the metamorphosis happening? Like, is
Mhm.
my right side dying? Because it's not a pain, but it's like it's something different that wasn't there 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Anybody else like to add to this? Either, you know, personal reflections or from the readings or
I think it's always I mean, because I'm a doula, so I kind of get to share some of this, especially if people ask me about preconception. It's not very common actually. Preconception questions or people don't seek me out for that. It's usually like postpartum or I'm having problems lactating or feeding my baby. So it's usually not you know, before they get pregnant. It's when they're pregnant or after they've had their baby. But when I do get to review this, it's just so fun because I think when you learn about the hormones in your own body, and the different phases of the cycle, you just can't help but think about like the moon cycles. You can't help but think about nature. You can't help but think about, um, you know, different periods of rest that your body needs and nutrition. Like I can tell when I'm getting more hungry and like craving protein. So I know kind of sometimes from that alone where I'm at in my cycle. And that body awareness, I think, is really fun to kind of just on as a, you know, individual, as a person or personally, just to be aware of that. And I think for women that come to me for education or care, when I can kind of like we can sit down and talk through some of this. I think them understanding more about their own body is helpful for them. Even if it, you know, maybe we don't fit or maybe you know, our care looks a little different than what they came to me for. I think you can't help but think about some of those things when you look at the cycle and the different parts of the you know, how the endometrium like thickens. I think that's so cool. And then it sheds. Yeah, I just think all of this is it's kind of fun to learn about.
Mhm.
And it's also I love that it in the books, in the readings, it says like it's a normal physiological process. And these are some of the things people can experience and to be aware of. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that's really big too, like normalizing it. You know, both Jade and I, we don't get consulted very often for conception, you know, and we don't get asked to come in for conversation with young women, you know, coming of age. I mean, outside of our families or our communities. Um, but we use this all the time, you know, when we're taking history, when we're doing prenatals, when we're talking about previous pregnancies. There's all this interlaced in education about this and normalizing the conversation. And then, you know, I've had these conversations with women who are on fifth or sixth baby, and you know, they're not aware of their cycle changes, you know, or their cycle patterns, I should say, you know, and not in the sense of like pointing out their lack of self-awareness, but if they're wanting to change how they're family planning, or if they're wanting to get a better guess if they're not sure on their dates, you know, then we talk about their cycle lengths, you know. So, and that's why this whole unit is, it's foundational. Like we're always going back to this, we're always going back to this. And I think that, well, I know I'm not alone in thinking that, you know, our community's availabilities or access to care that usually takes care of these things, or that usually gets directed these questions, might change, you know. And talking about cycle awareness is directly linked to fertility awareness, and all of it. I mean, it's all connected. So yeah.
My experience has been clients don't actually think of midwives as the people to come to when thinking about their menstruation cycle or their body processes. They automatically go to the OB. Oh, my hormones are out of whack, or you know, I need birth control to regulate my cycle, or you know, whatever the case may be. And there's been quite a few women where and I don't, you know, I kind of agree with Jane. It's not really a lack of self-awareness. It's a lack of the vernacular at all. You know, I had a gal that I said, so, okay, so tell me about your cycle. How long is your cycle? 5 to 7 days. She considered her entire cycle just the period of time in which she was shedding blood. And so I said, okay, no, like from start to finish. And she was like, yeah, 5 to 7 days. And so I had to kind of like explain to her, like, no, I mean like the day that you start and then the day that you start again, like that's a cycle. And so we talked about like ovulation and the hormone surges and what's happening, and she was blown away that she had like 5 or 6 sisters, and nobody had ever really talked with her about this kind of stuff. So I've been trying to incorporate a lot more of this in some of my marketing, because I fill up really fast. So if I'm doing preconception counseling, those are potential clients that I'm already building rapport with. So I'm looking at it from both that marketing type perspective, and from just the educational perspective. And then when we talk about at the 6th week and we talk about like, hey, what are your, do you have any family planning questions? You know,
Yep.
what are you guys wanting to use? A lot of times, and Jane can probably back me right up, they don't have a plan.
Yeah. Yep. And a lot of these conversations can, I mean, they're very reflective in your consulting visits or your early prenatal visits, and they come back around a lot, you know, and then definitely in the postpartum too, and then how age can play into those questions and conversations that you create, and actually how many pregnancies that they've had. You know, like I was just talking about a grand multip, which is anything 5 and over, and this was her 11th child, and she's 43. You know, so those conversations they're going to be different than what I would talk with, you know, a 28-year-old that's had her 2nd or 3rd baby. Yeah. Anything else before we dive in to all 4 of these? Okay, so concise review. You know, being familiar with these charts and the key hormone players, knowing how it breaks down, the follicular, the FSH, the LH, when your estrogen peak happens, when your progesterone drop happens, and how testosterone plays that fact in how testosterone plays its roles in our cycles as well. And this is going to come in very clutch when we start talking about like PCOS and struggles and balances with that, which we do see a lot more.
Infertility.
Yeah, which we do see a lot more in our communities, in different types, and that's the key thing about most people. And I'm not gonna, we're gonna get into that. That's gonna be a big conversation, not tonight, but this is very foundational for literally our entire this chart. If you could sum up our whole profession and our whole education, this chart is the foundation of all of that. And understanding how it breaks down, understanding when the shifts happen, because if there's variation in their length, in their cycle length, which we'll talk more about later tonight, this breakdown can look different if she's a 25-day cycler versus a 32-day cycler, or if in her postpartum, well, not her postpartum, but if she says in her history, oh, I have like 40-day cycles, or I only bleed it once every 60 days. Well, maybe you only bleed that many times, but that doesn't mean that you're not having lining cycles, your lining cycle, and understanding how that might, where and how that might be having struggles and hiccups. Okay. So here's another breakdown of it, like what's going on, the changes going on in the uterus and the cervix, how, and I'll be posting these too, we don't have to read them all, but understanding how, if she's saying, well, I check my fluids and I can't find my cervix. Okay, well, what does that mean? So her cervix is posterior, but she's saying that the fluids that she's maybe experiencing might not be reflective of that. Okay, well, then her hormones might be struggling to shift over, depending on if it's shifting between follicular and ovulation, or ovulation and luteal, depending on the combination of where she's self-reporting that, where she can feel her cervix, and the consistency of the fluids that she's, if she's using family planning where they're checking their basal temperature, and we'll talk about these too, but knowing those combinations very much changes recommendations, what her body is saying it needs support with, and how it might affect her being able to conceive. Okay, and then here's, like I was saying, if they're choosing to, or if you're talking about using cervical discharge as part of their self-check, knowing, well, I'm feeling this, and knowing what this could mean in the postpartum too. Like, okay, I'll tell myself my body is a hot mess, super hot mess. I literally was just messaging Jade. I'm like, why in the F sauce am I having, ovulatory discharge, and I'm 4 days away from when my time is supposed to start? So I know my body is struggling because I shouldn't. That makes no sense why I'm having like fertile window discharge, but I'm a dozen days past my fertile window. So I know my progesterone is struggling. That's what that's saying. Okay. Also what they're telling you that they're experiencing, okay, can be very telling about which hormone might be dominant, which hormone might be lacking, when the switchover is struggling. So pulling these out of the conversation, you know, and knowing where all those potentially fall into place. Right. And knowing too, through those conversations, when there's big things that are standing out as like very, very heavy hormone imbalances. You know, I bleed very heavily for 7 days. Well, you shouldn't be. Well, I've always done that. Well, you shouldn't be. You know, just because you've always done it doesn't mean that that's normal. It might be common for you, but then you've commonly had that hormone imbalance the whole time you've been menstruating. You know, so it's very common for us to come up against this acceptance of like, well, it's always been like that. It doesn't mean that there isn't a problem.
Or that's my normal.
Yep, that's my
I
normal.
like to say there's actually no such thing. There's normal and then there's not. There's common, this is common to you, but it's not normal.
Yep, and exactly, that's where, and that gets confused a ton. Well, it's normal to pee your pants every time you sneeze after 2 babies. No, that's not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. It actually shouldn't matter how many babies you've had. You shouldn't ever pee your pants when you sneeze. It gets accepted as normal because it's so common and actually just brushed off essentially by the medical system. So then it's just become overlooked, like, well, yeah, that's normal. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just your new normal. That's just normal. Like, no, we're misrepresenting to women the difference between common. There's lots of common struggles in pregnancy and in postpartum, and even with your cycle in general. Even if someone chooses to never get pregnant, there's lots of common struggles, but that doesn't mean that they're normal. Right? Any questions so far?
Is my mute off?
No, I can hear you, Mom.
And so what this brings up for me is something that was emphasized earlier, knowing where to go for your charts and your references when you're working with a client that's brought up something, you know, because this can't all stick in everybody's head exactly. So it's consciousness of your resources and your references to come back to that client and keep the conversation going with her. This the normal versus common is, I've never heard it quite spoken like this, and it is a huge distinction you're making.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a huge one of, it's normal for you to have raging hot flashes if you're menopausal. No, it's not. That's actually not normal. It's common, and it has become accepted as normal. But if you look at a lot of the older literature, and if you read some of the older generation accounts, even midwives' accounts, they didn't have great big huge, you know, symptomatic signs of this means that they just stopped bleeding. You know, they didn't have, you know, rage sessions or night sweats or, you know, and that's just been brushed into the normal pile, you know, because now we can just take some PMU pills and fix all of it and it's fine. Okay. But
in my experience, women who have not used hormonal birth control, so
don't experience that.
They don't have it at all. They don't have any of those problems.
Yep.
And
that's mine too.
One day they just don't have a cycle anymore. And they're not menstruating. They have no hot flashes, no hormonal imbalances, no nothing. And I always, because you didn't, A, you were never pregnant, and B, you didn't use artificial birth control to abstain from or avoid a pregnancy.
Well, and if you dive into the literature and you really geek out down that hole, perimenopause did not become a diagnosable thing until a half a generation after synthetic hormone pills became the regular.
Correct.
You were either menstruating or you were menopausal. There wasn't this like quote unquote transitional, oh, you're going to be perimenopausal for 5 years. Because actually, what classifies you as menopause is you haven't bled in a year. And you're either menstruating or you're not menstruating. So then this whole big diagnostic subsection of perimenopause all of a sudden started popping up in the literature about this new set of symptomatic mess. And I mean, it's like scopolamine. I mean, it's wonderful hindsight, and maybe sometime the system will get there, but it's just not there yet. Right, any other thoughts or questions on this one? Somebody want to start us off with systems, needs and demands, calories and adrenals? From the reading, or how would you talk about this?
Because this is really, really, really going to be the bulk of your conversations with your pregnant clients.
Yeah. For several prenatals in a row, probably. This is honestly, arguably, the hardest part of our profession.
Our dead horse.
What's that?
Said our dead horse that we beat.
Yep, this is our dead horse. This is our big fat dead horse that we're always coming back to. Okay. So what are things that can tell us adrenal struggles are happening? Well, how many things on this list just get labeled as normal? Oh, well, this is just normal for, you're past puberty. This is just what it is to be a menstruating woman.
These are what you can come to expect during this window of life.
No. Oh, this is just normal pregnancy stuff. Oh, this is just, this is just normal 20s. Oh yeah, you're in your 20s. This is just normal. Okay. Hence our big dead horse. Okay. Again, common, but really what it's saying is your body needs something. Needs resources, needs support, needs rest. Majority of the time needs protein.
Calories.
Okay. Needs calories. And I was actually talking with somebody before, so it's really easy to get a hold of calories. Okay. Oh yeah, well, I eat all the time. Okay, well, what are you eating? Well, I had 4 corn dogs for lunch.
Corn dog gal.
Yeah. I mean, Jade had a repeat client. She basically grew an entire 2 babies on corn dogs.
She tried to feed us corn dogs in her labor.
Yeah. Yep.
Corn dog gal.
Yep. So calories does not equate adequate resource load. Okay, so our bigger
nutrient density, right? Like your calories have to be nutrient dense. Like you don't eat marshmallows.
Nutritive density. Okay. I used to talk about proteins, fats, and carbs, but I was really starting to see like people get stuck in their little carb hole. So now I shifted, we talk about proteins and fats.
That's all. Eat carbs.
That's it. Okay, because if you focus on proteins and fats, everything else balances out. But they would always, and sometimes, and I'm not, okay, we're not mom blaming. We get it. Mom life, we're all there. Like, and it's hard. And sometimes we're the only Jiminy Cricket that they have. Okay, but what does that really look like? You're building a whole nother person. You need to protein source. Okay. Now, carbs are easy, carbs are fast, carbs are grab and go. Okay. So that's why I really conscientiously started directing my conversations to proteins and fats. Okay. Because even if you just focus on that, you're going to still get plenty of carbs. Okay.
Mm.
Especially because there's this misunderstanding in common perception of, the food pyramid and what's really a carb and what's really a starch. Okay. If you focus
Totally.
on the proteins and fats, I mean, there's plenty of starches in vegetables, but that's not what pops into your brain when you're like thinking about healthy starches, right? Okay. Again, another list: adrenal struggle, adrenal fatigue. But how much of this is just like, yeah, well, that's just being postpartum. Oh, that's just, you're just in the middle of your cycle. These are the first ways that our menstruating bodies say that they need more.
I like the I think it was in Varney's where it said the nutrition part. There was like some paragraphs about talking to youth or adolescents about nutrition and how they're really influenced by their peers, what they eat, especially teenagers. So like they'll take in more of the sugars and the sugary drinks and the caffeine, which aren't that great for 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 their overall nutrition and growth. But kind of the tips were talking more about like the benefits of good nutrition. You're gonna have healthier skin, you're gonna have healthier looking hair and teeth, and a healthy looking appearance as like a way to motivate them, or the benefits of having like a good balanced diet, and just being more mindful of like the sugar, caffeine, those other calories they're getting that's not nutrient dense. I thought that was kind of funny because I was like, oh my gosh, like I thought about how I ate as a teenager. I remember having like pop for breakfast one day, and this wasn't at my parents' house. This was like when I was not at my parents' house, spending the night with friends or whatever. Brownies for breakfast, pop. I'd have Dr. Pepper at lunch, like just like junk food, and then I just felt awful, and then I'd break out in acne and
Mhm.
things like that. So I thought it was kind of funny that that's how they were talking about this, but I appreciated how they broke down the nutrition for and the different vitamins that you can get and where you can get those from, and even like vegetarians, like if they plan well, they can get all of their proteins pretty well. But I don't know how they do it, but I could never be a vegetarian.
Well, the key statement there is if they plan well. And I've supported a few vegetarians through pregnancy, and I've yet to see one that plans adequately.
Mhm.
Okay. And my conversation that I kind of pose to them is, have you ever seen a pregnant cow? Okay. And not in the sense like I'm comparing you to a cow. Okay. Let's just get over that, first. So sometimes it takes a little bit of like preface. Um, how often do you see that pregnant cow not eating? Right? Never. I mean, they're constantly sourcing, they're constantly sourcing, they're constantly sourcing. And that's where I try and start that conversation, because not only vegetarian pregnancies aside, another leg to our big dead horse is frequency of sourcing. It's like trying to put braces on an alligator to encourage women to value sourcing at adequate intervals, which I would prefer every hour and a half. But like if I can get her to be consistent every 2 hours, you know, and all the conversations, and I mean, like I said, this is the foundation of everything that we do. So we'll be talking lots and lots and lots about this, you know, even the suggested rates. Did anybody come across suggested protein grams per day for a menstruating body? Now, we're not saying even trying to conceive or pregnant, just in your menstruative years, what do you think is a good protein load, daily protein source load? Anybody want to throw a number out there?
This is
70.
probably low, but I'm gonna say 70. I think it's probably more than 70 grams, or around 70 grams or more.
More
That's a
than
good-
70. But it's a
That's
good
a
start.
start.
I would love if they got that 70.
Yeah, I would love it if they got that. 100 grams. Not pregnant, not trying to conceive, not postpartum. This is just a menstruating body. 100 grams a day. Okay. Sometimes we're struggling to get women to get 50 or 60 a day in their second trimester. Okay. And this is what I'm saying about, you know, the cultural or the social conditioning, the societal conditioning of all calories are good calories, fast calories, you know, like there's this huge disconnect about nutritive quality caloric density. And well, I had some crackers. Well, I had peanut butter, you know, I had those cheesy peanut butter crackers that I got at the gas station and the Coca-Cola. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that is best. Just eat something.
Well, I mean, there is an argument for that too. Like if they're struggling with HG and that's all they can keep down, okay. Like, but that's not the normative conversation either. Like we're talking about, you know, and that's that mentality. Well, I ate something. Well, I ate something. Like, okay, yes, there's times when that can be part of the conversation, but a majority of the time, that's not the case. You know, and now the nice thing is there's all kinds of snack packs and granola packs and, you know, protein bars and, you know, not my favorite, you know, something with a face is best. There's let's start there. Okay. And again, not saying that vegetarian pregnancies aren't possible, but it takes a heck of a lot more work and heck of a lot more planning than any of them are actually doing. Okay. But if you don't have those self-implemented dietary restrictions, okay, if you're building a body, it's going to take a body. Okay. And yes, sometimes the pre-mixed protein drinks or protein bars, okay, if that's what fills the gap once or twice a day, okay, but that's not, it's so
It's not your
commonly,
full replacement.
yeah, it so commonly gets replaced with it. Okay, but well, I mean, this is what we're saying. We'll get into lots of nutritive stuff later, not trying to get hung up here and screaming at our continuously dead horse. Sorry, guys. Moving on. Okay, variations in cycle lengths and phases.
No, but that, I mean, what it's such an important advocacy role because you know, much of that stuff is sold as literally says supplement, replacement,
Meal replacement bars.
you know,
Yeah.
and the average person has limited defense against, or limited ability, it seems, to think through that deeper.
Yeah, and then sometimes, I mean, and our communities have further restrictions. I mean, I have supported households who sustain on commodities. You know, how do we create that conversation around that too without the additional fear, shame, and guilt? You know, how do we alleviate that? How do we work around it so that they feel good, and then they're motivated, and then therefore they invest in it by doing it without the associated undertones to it.
That's a huge conversation.
Yep. It is. And even if, sometimes even if the household itself might be not sustaining on commodities, maybe they grew up that way. So then their purchasing patterns and their household meal patterns still reflect that. I mean, super, super common for our communities to be in that cycle. Okay. And that's where figuring out what resources are on each of our reservations, either through WIC or even in the commodities distribution office. I mean, sometimes ours up here on Fort Berthold, like they have cookbooks, they have recipe cards, so those can be resources that you bring to prenatals, ways to encourage those conversations. Okay, anything else for anybody on the calories and adrenals for now? Okay, so anybody want to start us with variations in cycle lengths and phases from the readings? Okay, so let's take a look at the pink one first.
Jane,
Okay.
I have a question. Sorry, I was really listening hard to what you guys were talking about. So when we're having a lot of our women are getting iron infusions, we never used to have that at all. There was no such thing as that. But I also think too that if we had known that we should be listening to what our families are telling us, like I don't know if women have a good relationship with their mother or with their grandmother to find out their cycles, because there's a lot of information there, and then of course our food sources were much healthier back, 100 years ago versus now, where things are really pretty much dead as they're hitting the store from traveling, right? And then but the iron infusions, we're seeing in home birth midwifery, we didn't have to send anybody away to get iron infusions, but we worked with a lot of women who were, again, getting their protein through supplements, the ones that were saying they were vegan or something, and they were downright scary to work with.
Yeah.
Their labors and their deliveries went well, but I don't know. It's
probably the worst looking placentas you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I just, I can think about the women even who are going through the like you said, the premenopause, and how some of them are having to end up with hysterectomies. So where does that come into place, or how does that fit in there with that? As far as, when you get to the point now where you are maybe going through that change, and I went through my change. I was completely done at age 31.
Okay.
That was it. But I couldn't, my mother had her cycle until she was in her late 40s, late 40s, mid 40s. My grandmother, I know, she ended up with, what did she end up? Oh, it was my aunt who ended up with a hysterectomy after her last baby. But yeah, that's all the history I know from my family on the female side. I don't have anything.
Sorry, go ahead, finish, Auntie.
Yeah, that was it. I just
Okay.
thought, well, iron infusions too can be so tough on your body.
Oh, very. Yep, very. And iron infusions is starting to become kind of a hot topic in the midwifery world. And some debate around it, there's lots of thoughts around it. And I'll do my little blurb first, and then Twinsy will take off on it because
I've had them.
she's had them. Okay.
I still get them.
So my experiences with them, like definitely what you're saying, vegan pregnancies. Okay. And it's actually part of the reason why I've never been posed with working with a vegan pregnancy, but I probably would not, because I just don't have the tools to legally carry for all those things. I can't prescribe them. It's just better because you're probably going to need them to just work with an OB, because they're going to make you go through all their stuff anyway to get one. There's and I think there's validity to all these potential schools of why they're needed. Okay, so our soils are not as nutritive dense, especially in the magnesiums, so that's not in our foods. Okay, it's the trace minerals that allow our body to access iron, metabolize iron, and hold iron. Okay, so then our ferritin levels struggle to maintain. Okay, I think that there is some validity in the vaccination debate, because that depletes our body to be able to access, utilize, or maintain trace minerals. Okay, and I think that there is definitely validity in when there's history of substance or alcohol use sustained, and it's probably some combination of all three to different degrees. Okay, and some of the programs that I've talked about, because all three of those can be huge factors in Indian country, do we just then supply iron builders, like Hemaplex or Floridex, where that's just, they take it all throughout their pregnancy, regardless of what their hemoglobin number says, because that's not necessarily a reliable number for people whose ferritin is all over the dang place. It's a huge debate. It's a huge question, and it can be a huge gap. And if you don't know those things about their history, and you don't know where their body's struggling, I mean, that can set up some big obstacles with poor outcomes even in pregnancy. So take it away, Twinsy.
Well, okay. So I'm going to have to divulge some of my own personal history here. So it'll go without saying that please keep some of these things in confidence. Not very many people know this about me. But I did heroin for the first time at 10 and a half years old. I did heroin every day until I was 13. From 13 to 18, I was incarcerated and on lithium and thorazine and Haldol as a daily cocktail until I turned 16. I did not start my menses until I turned 17, and I was off all substances, everything for over almost a year and a half. What I found was I went into liver failure in 11 years later. So I had not drank or did any kind of drugs or did anything. I was pretty straight edge from 18 to about 30. And when my liver started failing, they said, well, we would like to put you on a transplant list, but you have a substance misuse history. So we think you're just one step away from, being a heroin addict again. And so, no, you don't qualify to be on the list. So at that point, I knew, I had been stabbed when I was young. And so, I was stabbed in the stomach. And so I was given basically a gastric bypass, at 13 and a half years old. And that was primarily to save my life. So since then, you know, all the things with that, B12 deficiency, anemia, malabsorption. I'm always eating. I mean, people tease me because they're like, "Are you ever not eating?" And I'm like, "No, I constantly eat, because I'm not absorbing all of it." Up until last January, Jane,
Yeah. Yeah.
last 2 Decembers ago, was my last bone marrow infusion. And I started getting bone marrow because I was having iron toxicity from too much iron infusions. And so I was getting packed red blood cells and plasma and bone marrow. And 90% of it was due to my drug use history, even though it's been 30 years since I've done any kind of drug at all. So the only people I've ever recommended get an iron infusion were vegans or hardcore vegetarians that will only, you know, not even do dairy, not even do eggs. You know, they're basically vegans, but occasionally they'll have butter. So what ends up happening for a lot of women is I think the iron infusion becomes a nice Band-Aid
Mm-hmm.
initially. So they'll offer it to you because they're tired of listening to you talk about it. They have nothing else. You're doing nothing else.
Yeah.
I would venture that unless you have a substance misuse history or you are a vegan, you don't need an iron infusion. You need to eat better and take better supplements. But
Consistently.
my last pregnancy, I had iron infusions, alternating with blood transfusions every 4 weeks through my entire pregnancy. After my baby was born, I got 4 units of blood typed and crossed for me, because due to the drug use and due to my, I love that they call it an injury. Due to my injury, I will never be able to eat enough to maintain. If you ever see me out in public eat, I eat like a 2-year-old. And then maybe an hour later, I'll pull that meal out again and I'll eat a few more bites and I'll do it again. So I think that for me, iron infusions, blood products, have kept me alive. But I am not the norm. Most of your pregnant clients are not going to be heroin addicts at 12 years old. They're not going to have their internal organs rearranged due to, you know, what I consider a self-inflicted injury. But I had those things until the doctors could no longer give them to me. There is an expiration date, for lack of a better term, on that. You cannot get iron infusions forever. You will start to exhibit symptoms of iron toxicity, which is its own thing to think about. And so but I think that, so women of like my grandmother's generation, they were growing their own foods. They were sourcing their own meats. They were eating every part of the animal.
Organ meat, super important.
Offals, soup bones, you know, feet, like, you know, gelatin. And we don't eat that way anymore. I think there's been a resurgence in that. Especially my experience with some Native communities. There's been small little pockets of people that are trying to return to that more ancestral eating. But it has not taken off in the way that it's going to require to benefit every pregnant woman. But I think that for most women, iron infusions are given as a Band-Aid. But once you have an iron infusion, you get that first iron infusion, you feel like $1,000,000. You
Like
feel
everything's fixed.
oh, like everything is
Yeah.
fixed. And so you put all your eggs in that basket and you're like, oh, what was the iron infusion? Well,
Yeah.
it was, but that's not sustainable.
And more often than not, the habits around it, why you ended up needing it, don't change.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest thing. Even with the one person that Jane and I know, I recommended she get an iron infusion. It sustained her throughout her pregnancy so she could give birth at home.
Mm-hmm.
But she hit a wall in her postpartum,
Mm-hmm.
had a horrible mood and anxiety disorder in her postpartum that I would argue she still struggles with today.
For sure.
And
It
but
pushes all of the concerns off for a while, you know,
Yeah.
and these are, I mean, these are very, very important conversations, especially because a lot of us, you know, we work with programs where we actually might be visiting with young women or women who are wanting to get pregnant that do have similar histories, you know, and this is a consideration. Like, do some of our programs just want to provide those things? Like, do we just want to buy a case of Hemoplex and Celtic sea salt, you know, and this is just, oh, you came for your visit, okay, here's your supplies for the month. Like, because in, you know, sometimes it's funny, like when I visit with white families, well, if, you know, shit hits the fan, and I was like, yeah, well, we kind of already think that way because we live on the res, you know, so it's kind of that same mentality. Like, we don't get to drive to the hospitals. What if we don't, you know? And then, you know, some of us have experiences of, you know, being turned away from the hospitals. Like, that's very real to our communities, you know. So what are the conversations around that if we do have somebody who has similar history and that is a need, and, you know, we can't access that for whatever reason, but then how do we support them too, or yet, you know? And while talking about, well, this is the lifestyle, like, okay, that was the history, but understanding how that's going to change her cycle can affect the pregnancy, absolutely will probably affect the postpartum, you know. And how do you build that into her lifestyle? So then, because we're building the family, you know, she's the central nucleus of the family. So then our whole conversation, it's not the one and done recommendation that the OBGYNs get to be like, okay, well, but now she's out of our office and not our problem. You know, this is what it is about, creating support, community support from within the community. So this is absolutely a very important topic.
And so, and looking at, I had issues with my cycle length, my cycle thickness. They said, oh, you have fibroids, you have this, you have that. There were all these things that I ended up turning around to a large degree, as much as I could, with nutrient dense foods and supplements and things like that. I became a master herbalist, and I was, you know, doing everything that I could think of to get right again, because we were trying for another baby. But I had 8 years of secondary infertility after having 4 babies in 4 years. So my body from those stacked pregnancies couldn't recoup. I got clean at 18. I got pregnant at 18 and a half, 19. I had my last baby between 18 and 25, 19 and 25. I had 4 kids, and then I didn't have another one for 8 years after that. So, and then after that straggler was born, I kind of made the difficult decision against some of my religious beliefs. to not have any more children, because I couldn't see going through the blood and the iron and the transfusions and the infusions and all the things. I couldn't see doing it again. And I couldn't see ever giving birth in a hospital again. I chose a hospital birth with that child, and I just couldn't see ever doing that again. And so when we look at the physiological process of that, you know, when you're looking at the handouts, how many of you saw some of yourselves in those hormone imbalances?
Mhm.
Looking at that symptom profile, where are you at? Do you have a cortisol imbalance? Are you always super stressed? You got all these different things. Like 90% of these things can be turned around with our foods, what we're putting in our body. And but you know, getting back to iron infusions, I think that they took a rare thing and they thought, oh, this can make people feel better. This will get somebody through their pregnancy. They'll feel great. And then they kind of universally applied that to every pregnant woman with some low ferritin instead of trying other builders prior to that. And then what happens then is that as a woman tries to capitalize on those things, then she gives herself some iron toxicity.
Mhm.
And so you're constantly running this battle of, okay, how much is too much? But I think that just like eye ointment, just like, you know, prophylactic Hep B, like all of these things was originally for one small subset of the population.
Mhm.
But then they thought, oh, well, we can just give it to everybody because, you know, it's not going to hurt. And maybe we're going to catch that one woman that has an infection, and so we'll benefit her baby.
Mhm.
You know, so I think it
Or-
kind of runs along those lines.
Or stave it off until it's somebody else's problem,
Correct.
a
Yeah.
different department's problem.
Yep. Let's get their baby born and get them out of here.
Mhm.
And then if she
Oh.
comes back for care, maybe. But most women aren't coming back to care.
Mhm.
But I have kind of a love-hate relationship with iron because it's really hard to tell somebody that iron and blood products saved my life and then in the same breath be like, hi, but please eat better.
Yeah.
Please eat, just eat better. You know, but I do acknowledge that most people anyway, don't have such a, you know, such a history
Mhm.
profile.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Twinsy. It's helpful that you know, we have someone with personal experience, because all I have is midwifery experience and you know, trends. Anyway, oh no, don't go. Oh shoot, where's my charger?
Oh, that's you. I'm like, wait, no, I have plenty of battery.
Right.
Thought that was me too.
I
No,
thought that was
sorry,
me
guys.
too. I was starting to panic.
Oh. Okay, so variations in cycle lengths and phases. Okay, so pink chart. Okay, if someone says like, oh, I have a 34-day cycle, 37, 23, like that's gonna shift their fertility window. Okay. It's not gonna, potentially, I mean, that's not to say that it's not possible for somebody with a 32-day cycle to ovulate on the 13th, 14th day, as you know, the standard comparative 28-day cycle that you see everywhere. It is possible, but it's more than likely not that they're not gonna, you know, so if they're trying to capitalize or avoid their fertility window, that's why it's important. Okay, so probably most common, these are common fertility awareness methods, you know, taking your temperature, checking mucus and cervical position. Okay. Here, oh, if someone's doing temperature check, you know, this is how to say what you're looking for, you know, so understanding these methodologies. So when you're in those conversations, this is what you're looking for, you know, you're looking for the spike and then the sustained elevated from your follicular phase, lower baseline, then there's a spike, then there's a raised baseline in the luteal phase. Okay. And knowing too, like if someone comes, well, I've been charting and this is what it looks like. Okay, being able to understand what it's looking like, you know, and we've seen some wonky donkey charts, some just all over the place, double spikes, baseline all over the place,
Flat.
flat. Okay. And the first question is, well, when are you taking your temperature? Oh, after breakfast. Oh, before I go to bed. Oh, you know, well, usually when the baby is down for a nap. It's like, okay, well, first and foremost, that's not how you do it. Okay. So, you know, knowing what's the first things to rule out. You know, well, first thing to rule out is consistency. You're supposed to put that thermometer in your mouth before you get out of bed to pee.
Right.
Okay. You know, so having the question, what's that?
To just break down and get an Aura ring, and then it does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, and then being familiar with the products out there too. You know, now there's the band or the ring, or it's literally an armband that you sleep with and it takes your temperature for you. But I mean, those, some majority of the time, we're not going to have those resources. Okay.
Right.
So what's cheap, fast, and easy? Well,
Yeah.
under the tongue thermometer. Okay, right by the bedstand.
Before you open your eyes, reach over, grab it before you
Yep.
get out of bed, before you sit up.
Don't take a drink of water. Don't go pee. Don't sit up on the bed for 5 minutes before you do it. Like, before you lift your head off the pillow, you reach over and you stick that sucker under your tongue. Okay. I think ferning is wildly undersourced for limited communities. You know, it's almost never wrong.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah.
never wrong. My preceptor did a lot of her work in Mexico and on the border. So this is what all the aunties and grandmas taught the young girls. You know, you lick your east window, and as you're doing your morning chores, let it dry. And saliva doesn't lie. Blood,
Yep.
urine, and saliva don't lie. Our favorite fluids.
Yeah.
Okay. And these little pocket microscopes, like $20. You know, so maybe that's something that a community program considers in their coming of age counseling. You know,
Nice.
it doesn't expire. You don't have to refill pills. You know, you're not dependent on them finding a ride into IHS. There's no hormone interference.
It's good any time of the day.
Yeah, and it's morning is best because you haven't eaten and you haven't, you know, your temperature hasn't shifted. But literally anytime, if you hit that fertility window, your saliva doesn't change in your fertility window, and it's very clear. You know. Well, any questions about any of that?
What does it say behind Twinsy's face? A rise in estrogen before.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
And I actually like the ferning more than I like the LH strips that you pee on, the ovulation predictors, sorry. I don't think that those are always accurate.
I agree. I particularly prefer ferning, especially in the first year postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially in the first year postpartum, because just because you're not shedding doesn't mean you're not ovulating,
Right.
you know, and sometimes depending on the brand of the LH strips, they're more dependent on the flux of the estrogen, progesterone. You can get what you think are like, well, I ovulated twice this time. Well, you probably didn't, but your estrogen, especially in the first 6, 9, 10 months of postpartum, it's just probably a little wonk, you know. So
Just because you have an LH surge doesn't mean that you ovulate. So if
Yeah.
you have a double, if you pee on those sticks and you're like, oh, I ovulated twice, Jane and I are looking at you like, no, you probably didn't. Your LH surge tried, you didn't ovulate, and then your LH surge tried to do it again, and maybe you ovulated.
Yep.
Maybe.
Especially if you're exclusively breastfeeding. That LH is going to get disrupted by oxytocin really easily, but it's not going to overly affect the estrogen rise enough to create ferning. Like your estrogen might rise and you don't ovulate, but then you don't fern. If it rises enough to allude that you probably ovulated, you're gonna fern. If that makes sense. Okay. Anybody wanna start us off on the last one from the readings? What you pulled out about nutrition and supplement? Probably not too much in these readings about herbal support, and that's another thing that we're going to build throughout, and then we're actually going to have a unit just about herbal support too, so don't feel like we're not
Yeah, we're not glossing over it.
What, Teeny?
When you're done with that, can I have it?
We're not talking about that right now, honey. Go get your brother Axel.
But I want to play with them, George.
Okay. Anybody want to start us off? We've talked some about it, but anything that particularly stuck out in the readings? Okay. So particularly about adaptogens, these are some of our favorites. Some we talk about more than others, some in different stages. You know, our recommendations for just menstruational support are going to look a little differently than if they're trying to conceive and they have cortisol adrenal struggles versus in different trimesters and postpartum. But for the most part, these are the big ones. I don't know where to put your face right now without being in the way.
Why did I just do that?
Well, because it doesn't look at me while I'm talking. Again, thinking about access, you know, there's things that you can find just in the kitchen or at the grocery store. Ginger and turmeric, blueberries, aloe vera, you know, those are excellent ones and pretty easily accessible at dang near every grocery store. Excellent. So, and some of these we can grow in our parts of the country, you know, and this is, I mean, so we will be talking about ones that are specific to where we live too. But these ones, there's lots of literature. And you know, these can be pretty easy ones to stockpile too. And common ones where, you know, Twinsy and I both make a good amount of tinctures, our own tinctures. Here's some.
I'm hungry.
Here. And castor oil packs. I mean, I think those are fantastic for all kinds of things, hormonal, particularly for women. And that is, in my opinion, a pretty underutilized tool. The kind of biggest drawback with that is it is very dependent on consistency. And you do need to use it for a bit before you notice a difference. Whereas usually with the herbs or spices or tinctures or teas, you know, people are going to be more motivated to use them because they're going to notice changes sooner. Okay. Specifically when shedding has happened, you know, there's some ones that are more so focused on just their moon time, like inactive moon time. So having different recommendations for luteal phase, follicular phase, even ovulation window, you know, and that's where it's very helpful to know when their 5-day fertility window is happening, because you know, maybe you're talking about maca root, or you know, maybe they're actively trying to conceive, and you know, they're really trying to capitalize on that. So knowing what those recommendations can look like, especially if there's an emotional component, and we'll talk more about the bigger conversations in the emotional component when they're trying to conceive. If they've tried, then you know, we've tried everything, we've been doing this for so long. So sometimes the recommendations might not necessarily be about supporting the cycle versus supporting the cortisol and the adrenals and the emotional parts. Because sometimes that can be the bigger roadblock than actually capitalizing on the fertility window itself. And for men too. So
Jane, Shoshana would like to know if you can put some of these, could we put some of these possibly, like, you know, WhatsApp, some of these PDFs?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. I will, I can post all of them. Yeah, I can post all of them. And you'll have the recordings too, this recording. So yeah, for sure. The one on the left, you know, so talking about supplements too. And knowing when and which ones can enhance, if you're making tea recommendations, you know, or knowing which ones, if they want to stick to teas more than pills, you know, well, and even that too, you know, what's their preferred access method that they're actually going to do. You know, it's not there's no point in recommending a whole bunch of teas if they're not a tea drinker. You know, yeah. There's no point in handing them over a tincture if they're not going to take the tincture. If they would prefer it in pill form, I mean, you can get all the teas in pill forms. You can make your own pill blends, you know, so we'll talk about those options too. But knowing which ones have more calcium, or if you say, you know, if they're, what am I trying to say? Taking calcium with nettles, you know, how is that going to support it? Right. The one that I would change is the B12. You know, I like to recommend methylated B12 because, well, lots of reasons. Especially if they're over the age of, what'd you say, 25, 26?
It's processed better by the body because it's not a synthetic form of the vitamin.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can, and you can take less of it because your body, you could take less of it because your body, you know, can utilize it better.
Yep.
But it is almost impossible to overdose on B12. Yep. So feel free to take it every day, twice a day, 5 times a day.
Actually, very
16,000% of the recommended dose. It's not going to hurt you. You're just going to have really expensive pee if you pee it out.
It's a very common recommendation for me if somebody has a very heavy caffeine use early in pregnancy or going into pregnancy, and they're scared about their energy levels dropping too much. I'm like, well, you can take methylated B12 as much as you were drinking soda. D3K2 is another common almost basically standard recommendation for me because we live in the Northern Hemisphere, especially if a majority of their pregnancy is in the winter. And there's a lot of literature stating that every menstruating body is D deficient. And it's kind of not in the sense I make that assumption, but we don't have standardized tests. We don't do blood testing when women come into our care. But there again, you know, it's one of those things you can't overdo. And, you know, almost all female menstruating bodies need it for something. It's super fundamental for our values.
I recommend about 50,000 IUs a week on average to anybody that lives up, you know, up here.
Yep.
Because we're not in the sun enough.
Yeah. I definitely recommend it if they're heavy dairy consumers. Because that propaganda was wonderful. Oh, get all your bone strength through cow milk. Actually, not usually. But I do get lots of ranchers' wives that have 5 cups morning, noon, and night, and then wonder why they're having like cramps. It's like, well, actually, you're not accessing the right kind of vitamin D that your body actually
great fats.
Yeah, great fats. You know, same with magnesium. You know, you'll hear us talk about different types of magnesium, and most of the time when you see commercialized meg blends or meg complexes, great and fantastic, but it's not actually the right kind of magnesiums that women need, much less pregnant bodies. So, I mean, number 5, it says magnesium for better sleep, muscle recovery, and blood sugar levels, which is true for different types of magnesium, but there isn't one magnesium that does all 3 of those things. So, and we will get into all of those. If someone is really struggling with PMS or PMAD or PPMAD, omega-3s, you know, high levels of omega-3s. And actually histamines, PMS, most women are actually having histamine reactions. Developing a protocol recommendation for someone that has a history of GBS, and, you know, creating that conversation. But regardless of that conversation, because of previous experience and how it gets presented in the medical system, they might still have a emotional attachment about that. Well, I don't have a way to test for that. So I have a protocol that I recommend if they would like to do something prophylactically that involves probiotics for her and her partner, and creating the conversation around that. Okay, anything about this one before we move on? Okay. Oh, next one was vaginal health, vaginal and sexual health. Okay. Again, super important conversations in all stages, even if they never choose to get pregnant. You know, lots of missed opportunities in our communities to talk about these things before choosing to be sexually active, you know, or in the early stages or at any point. We're recovering from generational taboos of creating these conversations with our daughters. And I think that's a wonderful change that we can create in our communities, because we don't always have access or ability to have the blood work or know get confirmation through that way of what's going on. And usually, for the most part, these conversations aren't broached until after the fact sometimes, or in the middle of it, and understanding how they can affect pregnancies, current pregnancies, later pregnancies. So here again, you know, this whole unit stuff that we're gonna build on the whole rest of the program too. So GBS, Group B strep, BV, bacterial vaginosis, UTIs, Candida, STD, STIs, signs and symptoms, and tests. There was a little bit. There was a little bit in the literature. We'll get into it a lot more when we talk about abnormalities. You know, right now we're trying to focus on normal and physiological normal. So then abnormalities kind of stick out like a sore thumb a little bit quicker. Okay, so mastering physiological normal. Okay, anybody want to share anything from the readings or questions? I mean, we'll talk about this a lot, you know, when we talk about prenatals and history taking, and actually when how these things can affect first trimester development, how sometimes they can play out in active labor, things to watch for, how to address them, you know, and sometimes self-protection, you know, sometimes, I mean, Jade and I both have had experiences where some of this history was not shared with us, and it came out later in the pregnancy or in active labor, and we had to make choices about how to protect ourselves or not, or, you know.
Or the choice was taken from me and I got exposed and I had to do 6 months of testing.
Yeah, that one. Where I've, my couple experiences, they were, one was very upfront from the beginning, and one, not that she was withholding, she had her first outbreak experience active in pregnancy, so she was just not aware that she was a carrier, which can happen. Okay. Next topic was assessing clinical gynecological history. So we'll do a quick explanation of all these, so we're just all up to par. Okay. Pap smears. Get your face out of the way to our twin. Okay,
Don't
so
let me cover that cervix.
What's that?
Don't make me cover that cervix.
All right, here, I'll put you up on the stirrups. Two most common, the brush, the center of the brush gets inserted into the Oz, and then they spin it. And then the swab and scrape are the two. I actually don't know if there's any other standardized. I don't think so. Yeah.
No, not universally applied.
Not in this country anyway.
Mm.
Okay, so if they talk about their history, or if they know their history, or if you see it in the clinical notes and then there was a follow-up, you know, what's next steps? Okay, well, sometimes colposcopy is the next step, with or without a tissue biopsy, and it's a pinching. It's usually the pinch one where they just like grab a wad. The punch one isn't as common, I'm understanding. But yeah, so this one, when they're doing,
Depends on what they're looking for.
Yeah, it depends on what they're looking for, but usually they'll dye the cervix, and then they'll just use the little pinch forceps to grab the tissue of the abnormal dyed cells.
As opposed to the old school cone biopsies.
Yeah, that's so my understanding, and I mean, I could be a little outdated. It's been a while since I've brushed up on SOPs just because I haven't needed to. My understanding, my last understanding is like, this is the middle ground. This is usually the next step, because then they'll path it and, you know, all that fun stuff. And this is a LEAP procedure. So then depending on the colposcopy, sometimes the LEAP is what they do first. There isn't a standardized SOP. This can be just up to care provider's discretion. If they're like, well, we'll just do this quick and it'll be done, and then we don't have to wait. So, you know, I'll get it all. And then like, it's.
And I've had some physicians say, look, if the colposcopy comes back positive, you're going to do this again in a LEAP.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing, say, cervical dysplasia, for example. I'm seeing evidence of cervical dysplasia. You're going to end up with a LEAP anyway, probably. If you want just one procedure done, I would recommend this. Like I've heard it pitched in that way, which isn't necessarily wrong. If you're for trauma to the cervix and your experience and all of that. But this is
this can be, sorry, this can be good to know, like if you're counseling with a girl that has to go back in, or young woman, sorry, not trying to be any way about it, but if someone is coming to you for, you know, well, I have to go to this. Well, if the emotional weight of longer unknown, because with the biopsy, they do have to culture it, they have to send it to path. You know, you're not going to get reassurance right away. It may have to be repeated. Okay. So sometimes if the trade-off is one and done, that's a consideration. However, the long-term consideration for this one is this could compromise the cervix ability to dilate in labor. Okay. And that's not usually part of the conversation.
And this may in fact risk someone out of home birth in an unregulated state.
It very much could. It very much could, especially if they have not successfully birthed vaginally since this procedure was done. Okay. If they have this procedure and then in less than 2 years get pregnant, that muscle has not had anywhere near adequate enough time to recover, heal, and regenerate. And you might not be able to manually break up that scar tissue to help that cervix dilate.
Right.
Okay. Now, if a woman has told me that, well, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, you know, when I was 17, I had a LEAP and I had one vaginal birth when I'm 22 and now she's 30. I'm fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. Okay. If a young woman is being presented with the possibility that she might have this done, it is a good piece of information. You know, if she knows she wants to have 5 or 6 or 8 babies, you know, potentially going through this twice might be in her best interest in the long run. Okay. Okay, so this doesn't work, or they don't get it all, or something comes back where it's more. Okay. Oh, and this is another image of a LEAP. This is still the LEAP. So they take out a cone shape. It depends on the shape of, there's this half D one, and then there's a smaller circular one that tends to be a deeper conocoid, then it goes deeper up the Oz. Then this one is this half D one tends to be more shallow. And more often than not, they're not going to be able to answer these questions, but it would be in their clinical notes. Okay, so this is the straight on to the cervix. So first picture that you can see the abnormal cells, the abnormal tissue. And that's the idea around it. Sometimes in this picture, they, you know, they do a clotting agent. Sometimes they cauterize it. And that's good to know too, because if they cauterize it and then she gets pregnant a year later, that cervix has not just not time, but I mean, those tissues were not given any chance to heal. It's a burnt open wound. Whereas
Yeah.
if they were just swabbed with a clotting agent, you know, that muscle might fill itself in. Especially if it was a shallower like this half D. You know. Okay. Any questions, or is this kind of making sense? Okay. So then a DNC, dilation of the inner and the outer Oz is done. Right, and then this little loop tool that kind of looks like a reverse cheese grater, with a hole in the center, and they basically cheese grate to a certain depth depending on what their concern is. And again, time, you know, if she has this done and it was done to like a 4 millimeter depth, which is pretty deep, but then, you know, gets pregnant within the next year, more likely than not, you know, you could be looking at a low-lying placenta. There just hasn't been enough cycles for the rugae and the lining to build to a thick enough depth for the conception to implant high in the uterus. And this is not, in my experience with women who have had these, those aren't part of the conversations that are happening in the office. Okay, and not slamming it, not making it us versus them, but it is good to have these questions and create these conversations, because then if she had this, say 15 months before conceiving, and then at 17 weeks in that pregnancy she starts spotting, then you know you're probably looking at a low implantation, and there could be some placental accreta developing or correcting itself. And more likely than not, she's experiencing a what's the word I'm thinking of? Placental bleed on the edge. Twinsy, what's the word?
Subchorionic hemorrhage.
Thank you. Yep. You know, and if she's experiencing it between the 16 and 18 weeks of that gestation, that's a very appropriate time to be seeing that kind of spotting.
And subchorios will often self-resolve without losing the pregnancy. But if the subchorio is at the curate site from a DNC, and the placenta has implanted anywhere along that site, you have a higher incidence of accreta, placental abruption, low-lying placenta, previas, all kinds of placental issues that are really hard to correct in the pregnancy.
Okay, any questions or thoughts? Okay. So Well Woman's Care, there are midwives who specifically offer just well women's checkups. Okay. We don't necessarily. However, I think that, I mean, our Well Women's Care is integrated into our care. You know, we really don't see women for their annual PAPs. First off, we can't do them. You know, and some women don't electively, they want a well women's checkup, but they know that they're going to decline the pap smear. So maybe a non-invasive well women's care with a midwife is a better option if they know that they're going to decline that test for whatever reason. So that can be a consideration in counseling or care that you provide. Here's what the current standardized recommendation for a clinical or annual check. Okay. And we have worked with women that are of a religious belief system that, you know, they don't do STD, STI testings. Okay. And if potentially, if that's the only, if her marriage is the only active sexual partner that she's had, and insisting that she has those tests, that can be very offensive, you know, and or if she hasn't changed partners, you know, those can be all considerations as to maybe why she might not want to have a standard clinical well woman's check, you know, and why well woman's care through a midwifery model might be a better option for her, you know. Again, like all of these topics in our antenatal care and our postpartum care, very integrated, you know. So our, what could arguably be our well woman's care, you know, the holistic model, mind, body, spirit, is much more integrated. Go take them to your sister, please.
Okay.
You know, so because we are talking about, you know, do you need to get out of the house? How's, you know, do you feel socially what am I trying to think of? Do you feel like you have enough social interactions? Are you getting out of the house enough? Like, do you feel trapped in your house? Like, all of those are things that we're talking about. And then therefore, like, if someone were to contact us and just want like women's annual care, it's not basically a whole new set of conversations that we're asking them, essentially, you know. And this is very much also what we're talking about when I ran out of coffee, so my brain shut off. Trying to conceive, conception counseling, you know, these are all questions that we're talking about bringing up in those conversations too, for her and her partner. Okay. Male health is, in my opinion, not adequately considered in conception counseling in clinical style care. You know, they think it's all about the woman, but it's really not. It's like 30% the woman, 30% the man, and then 30% of how their systems interact with each other. And 10% luck. Okay. How we doing on all this? Any questions or reviews or anything that you guys want to go back on?
No, just copies of all the picture PDF thingies would be helpful.
Yep.
To stare at.
I'll put this PowerPoint up as PDFs in the unit. And I mean, we still got 2.5, 3 more weeks in the unit too, so I'll get it up. But yeah. Okay. Real quick, and about self-reflections, you know, if you're using the journaling, if things are coming up about your own personal experiences and histories, you know, good to journal about them. And if you want to have a session with either of us or both of us about, you know, unpacking some of those things, you know, personal experiences, there can a lot can be coming up, a lot, you know. So I just want to take a couple seconds to encourage you to either utilize the journaling tool, or if you would like to, reach out to us and we can have a sit down too.
I just want to thank Jade for her forthcoming and honesty and sharing something so deep and experiential. And I too would encourage people to be journaling in the winter time now to you know, maybe take a tour of your own 8 pillars of self-care and check in with, you know, one new step or one small habit you can create to move yourself forward in one or several of those areas, because supporting the caregiver is so important for giving care to the women of your community.
I appreciate that. It's not something that I don't talk about because I'm ashamed of, right? Like I'm not ashamed of the things that I went through to get to where I am now. But it's not comfortable dinner conversation, right?
Mhm.
And for most people, I am here as an instructor. And so, but one of the things that Jane and I are really, really trying hard to do is to mend some of those fences between preceptors and students. And I think sometimes if you could just be real with somebody and be like, yeah, I had this thing. And like most of the time, if I talk about things that you know, I call it in my past life, but a lot of times the first instinct is for people to feel pity. And I think it's certainly understandable, but it's certainly not helpful, right? Like I know better than anybody that my mother was, you know, a crass human for doing the things that she did. But I think that when we're looking at, you know, our conception value and window, the things I did at 10 affected my fertility at 30. And I would have never made those connections. I would have never made the connection between I've been clean for, you know, however many, a decade and a half. I would have never made the connection between what I was doing when I was young you know, ideally my prepubescence, I would have never made the connection until I experienced it. And then obviously as a midwife, it was just like this huge, you know, light bulb above my head moment, like, oh, well, no duh. No duh, all those things were affected. And no duh, my body took a long time to recover from that. And oh, no kidding, I could help some of this by eating a little better or taking, you know, really timed, like all of my supplements are timed. And Jane and I, are you the one that termed stay alive? I don't remember. You were like,
Yeah.
yeah, Jane was like, damn, you got a lot of stay alives, you know, and I was like, well, I'm staying alive, you know. So,
Mhm.
but it's but I mean, I guess all that to say, I am I will talk about it because I think that while I might be the outlier, you might see somebody like me that you would have never guessed that they had this history, but they're showing up with this really complicated profile that you can't figure out. And maybe asking them, you know, have you ever experienced abuse? Have you ever, you know, these different things? So, you know, understanding that sometimes that's going to be a yes. And, you know, and realizing that even now, I'm still paying for in my body systems things that I did at 11. And so the idea that you can just, you know, stop using drugs and everything will be great, is actually not really the case for most people, and certainly not when we're talking about our fertility and
Mhm.
our needs for different supplements and things like that.
Mhm. And I think it's really important and a great opportunity, not that my twinsies experiences is to be capitalized on, but I mean, we kind of are.
Somebody might as well.
We kind of are, case in point, we were at a state workshop about the newborn screen, and we were talking about, the conversation was about state programs and blah blah blah. And Jay got up and she started talking about her son who has long-term effects from fetal alcohol syndrome, neonate substance use, all this stuff. And she was talking about her experiences with the programs in the States and how it supported her son. And one other care provider in the room asked, well, how do you accept this emotionally from the effects that you caused of your use during pregnancy? And she's like, my son's adopted. So they automatically assume that this her son came from her body, and like, she has this huge emotional culpability and like all these things that she created for her son. But they never, I mean, I'm not saying everybody in the room, but that particular one, was assigning blame to the parent and didn't know anything about the situation. Would it make any difference to know that the substance use at 10 was forced by a parent? Does that change it as the support and care that we provide later on down the road? Does it matter for us to know that? Maybe sometimes if there's a carryover emotional component, if there is the potentiality of self-remorse or self-blame or self-harm in the current pregnancy because of choices that were made for whatever reason 2 decades ago, sometimes it is applicable, sometimes it's not.
And really with that gal, it was about, you have some gall to show your bias
Right?
so glaringly.
First
Yeah,
off,
you saw my tattoos and whatever, and you automatically made this huge stretch of an assumption. And then later in the conversation, when she kind of came up to me to, backpedal, but I just said, you know what, it's okay, because my son is also my biological brother.
yeah.
And then she just shit the bed, and Jane and I walked off and had a good laugh about it, because the idea that my part in that shouldn't have actually mattered.
Mhm.
What we were speaking to was how we don't help kids that have been drug and alcohol affected. We make those actions punitive, and we don't actually look at the baby as its own client when they're going through those experiences. And luckily for me, in the state of California, my birth mother abandoned said child, and he spent 5.5 months in the NICU. And so we were able, like, they didn't have anyone to blame. They just had a baby to help. And they really did. They did an incredible job in the 90s with this human. And but a lot of it even now, they don't treat the NAS baby as its own client. They're always looking to, how did this baby get here? And really the facts are, it doesn't matter.
Well-
and I think that this gal was kind of making this nasty commentary because Jane and I were the only unlicensed midwives in this state and in this thing. So she was, it was just another little dig for her too. Like, we ended up talking later, Jane and I, and we were thought, oh, I wonder if she pointed us out because, we're the only ones not playing on their playground.
Well, here's another point to to remember, like if you're Native American, we call all of our aunties and, sisters and brothers, we're not blood related, but we're clan brothers and stuff. So in Indian country, by you saying that was your brother, for me, I would have to say, is that your biological brother?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
The white people don't understand that,
mhm,
but we do.
Mhm.
Because I have friends who say, oh, my brother. And I'm going like, oh, damn, I'm confused now because I know she does. I know she has one brother. Maybe she has an older brother because she was like a late baby, you know, older, late in life baby. And then we went someplace but that's how she identified people. She identified them in the kinship. Like, this is my nephew. This is my boy, you know, stuff like that. But the white people wouldn't understand. They'd be clueless, but Native people would understand that. But before we go, I did get hold of Cheyenne. She did say she would appreciate prayers and good thoughts.
mhm,
I told her we were having class and we're thinking of you. And it's her oldest daughter, Seneca. I think she might be in her late 20s, but she has congestive heart failure. So she's being, you know, medicated, and she's alert and talking. But I couldn't tell you if that her daughter was living with her in Winnipeg or not. I know for a while her daughter was in a different state. So I don't know if her daughter was home for the holidays when this all happened, but she said, thank you for the thoughts and prayers. And so do you feel the need to, you know, I know you guys have your cohort. And I don't know if you guys are still using that because I know Taylor, I think, had set that up. So I don't know if somebody else wants to set up a different cohort. That's totally up to you guys, you know, because this stuff here is, you know, private, and so that's totally up to you guys. But I just thought if you guys want to, if you're going to reach out to her, I think it would be greatly appreciated.
mhm.
So
Thank you
that's
for the
it.
update, Auntie.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think we'll just press on, you know, unless anybody absolutely needs a quick bathroom break. Is there anything, well, first off, does anybody want to take a quick bathroom break, or else we have, yeah, I think we'll make it right at 9 o'clock-ish. Are we good to go?
I wish, and I don't want this to sound weird, I wish the people who left could see the power of this evening, the community of learners you have built and we've collectively built because of people's willingness to speak honestly and to care about what we're learning and to care together.
Mhm.
You know, July 1 was only just a wink away, and look where you've all come to have these powerful conversations.
Mhm. No, I'm really proud of our students and what we're creating. So I want to thank
Yes.
everybody for making the choices that they made. Okay, last call for a quick break. If otherwise, we probably only have about 20 minutes or less. I think we'll hit right the 9 mark.
I'm
Okay.
going pee. I'll be right back.
Okay. Let me know when you're back.
How many people in it?
Did he say how many people on?
Yeah.
Take your microphone off. I gotta holler at you.
Gee, whatever. I'm recording.
My last one, Jane. My last one. I'm contemplating if I send some to the PO box or not.
Save it.
How's this working?
Hey, you want to take a client in Gillette?
What's the EDD?
Not pregnant yet, in preconception.
Yeah, potentially. Did I miss anything in the comments or did you catch me up?
No, I think everybody's caught up.
Okay. Pearl, take your methylated B12.
How far is Gillette from you? 5 hours? 4?
Let me double check. I think so. It's not bad. It's not Bozeman. Oh, I was going to 7. That's not bad though. Was it? There was a gal there that was gonna have, she consulted me for a breach. And she was gonna, I forget where she had a relative, but it was still on the Montana. Anyway, she ended up having her baby the next day, so, but nothing that I haven't contemplated before. So, yeah, potentially. I mean,
It's from the harem. So I'll get some information.
okay. Is it a potential road trip for us? Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay.
Possibly. And she said possibly high dollar.
Well, I would have just taken it for a road trip for you, but I mean, if you want to add sprinkles to it, I'll add sprinkles to it.
Hey. I don't do nothing for the harem without money. Not anymore.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm calling in favors this year. It's my 2025.
That's your resolution, calling in all
My
the
resolution,
favors?
calling in all my midwifery favors. I've ever done something for you? Come at me.
Does anybody need a puppy? I want to get rid of these puppies. They're huge. Oh.
Hey, the sister wife wants your deets. You fine with me sharing them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Hey, do you remember that student that I told the harem to fire?
Mm-hmm. They fired her.
They fired her. But she's practicing out of Sheridan right now.
Ooh.
And she just said, I have eternal beef with her, but whatevs. I guess I'll send her a client.
Well,
I said, Jane says she might be game.
I can empathize with that because I got an internal beef with a former client, 2 former client or student. I mean, 2 former students. I mean, but arguably one, like all she would have to do is stop talking about me wherever she goes. Like, just don't bring me up. Like, you really didn't even do anything to warrant bringing me up. Just stop dropping my name, and then people will stop contacting me about you dropping my name, and then just
I
go
have
on.
to stop dropping my name as well. It'd be nice.
Ugh, that'd be nice.
Be nice.
Who had to make a bathroom run? Are we back?
It was Medina.
Oh, okay. Dude, I'm still cramping from that cow. You guys, I did surgery on a cow on Saturday, and then That was
Then
my
got the baby the next day.
and that was my 11th time mom that had the baby the next day. Literally in the middle of our prenatal. Oh my gosh. Oh, I found out that one of her kids videoed the whole thing.
The cow or the baby?
The cow and me turning and me rolling the cow over and doing surgery on it. And like, okay. Freaking, and then my arm down the throat. Apparently it was the kid, was he like 7 or 8? So her 15-year-old was helping me out, and then I mean, I saw that the 8-year-old was holding her phone, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together in the moment that he could be, not that I care, but it's just hilarious to me because when I went back to do the newborn exam later that night, all of her family was there, and like everybody was like thanking me about the cow, and then and the baby's so cute, and I was like, okay. Are we back yet? Medina, are you back yet?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, sweet. All right. So, I think we covered a lot of stuff too, like tied in the readings. Is there anything from the readings that somebody has a specific question about or wants to expand on or clarify or anything like that? Because otherwise, that's what the quiz will just cover the assigned readings. Okay, anything from the readings? Okay, and there again too, main goal with the quizzes is to get you used to your library as a resource tool. So mostly it's like, because obviously, I mean, I know you guys are going to find the answers, so it's getting used to navigating the texts and information and all that too. Okay, so no questions about the readings or stuff that we covered tonight. Take him to your sister or your brother, please. Almost done. Okay, so what's next? I will open the quiz on Thursday, tomorrow, noon to midnight. And then start chipping away at the readings for the 2 weeks for conception counseling. Any questions about how that is broken up on the unit? Okay, so now we're right here on the 5th group call week 26. So then it's this portion, fertility and trying to conceive through midwifery model of care, couple sexual health, mental, emotional relationship components, recommended reading. If so, this isn't the limited reading, like, there's aspects, other areas in the text that will apply to, like RH factor, and you're welcome to read those too. I will be also adding more PDFs, applicable PDFs to those topics as well. So if you find topics in the required reading that are also applicable to these topics, feel free to read those as well. We won't have a quiz per se on that, but I do encourage you to still read the recommended, because we will have our first experience with the case study write-up for the certifying activity to get your certification in conception counseling.
Mom, he wants the nanas.
Well, he can have the nanas in a few minutes. I'm almost done. Okay. Any questions? Hey, stop, guys. Sorry. Any questions about accessing or looking for a cookbook related to pregnancy, or starting to establish your herbal library. We're happy. I'm happy, and I'm sure Twinsy will, since she's in her luster. Well, where are all your books? Over 3
They're here at the Luster House right
Okay,
now.
so we're happy to throw pictures out of what we have in ours. I don't necessarily have hardcore recommendations because everybody has different likes of how different herbal books are structured. If there is anything that I specifically want you to have access to, I will probably just provide those through PDFs or pictures or scans. But it is good to play around with different books, figure out what structure you like. You will have some that are, that you refer to a lot. I personally always like some of my favorites I found at thrift stores, and they're like from the 70s and 80s, and those obscure recipes are fantastic. So a little bit of an addiction, but we don't count it as an addiction because it's a book. Okay. That's what my mom taught me. It doesn't count if it's books or fabric. Joking. So
Fabric first, but
right. Our lecture, our call for that is supposed to be on the 15th. However, I have a conflict with that. I'm sorry. Can we look at possible days of availability for all of us? I don't necessarily think that we need to push it off for another week unless that's the general consensus. If we want to, or if we just switch it to that Friday or Saturday, let's brainstorm about that over the next couple days in the WhatsApp. Look at our calendars. I really apologize for my personal conflict with that. Any questions? Okay, otherwise, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys, your work and how you focus and your engagement in it. I appreciate the sacrifice of your thoughts and emotions on this and how receptive you all are to these seeds of knowledge that we're building on and nourishing. So I appreciate you guys.
And I really, I've been reading over the short essay responses, and everybody's stuff has been
Great.
spot on and just great. Yeah.
Yep.
It looks good.
Yep. So,
Mara, Shoshana.
thank you guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
Year.
Oh man.